Have you ever looked at a broken jug, an old door, or a pile of rocks, and seen a garden masterpiece? Most people see trash. But today, you'll see transformation. Welcome to Revive Nature, where forgotten things are brought back to life, one garden at a time. This video is packed with creative DIY ideas to turn everyday waste into something truly beautiful. Timestamps are available. Feel free to jump to the sections you need. And if you have questions, the comment section is open for you. And if you find even one idea worth trying, I hope you'll consider this. Maybe to you, I'm just another face on a screen. But behind this, there's a real story, and a small family chasing a dream. When you like, comment, or subscribe, you're not just supporting content. You're helping keep something real alive. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeing me. Behind every old door lies a story. Some open to memories, others to dreams. And some, like this one, become a canvas for nature's second chance. Tucked in the heart of a quiet neighborhood, a discarded wooden door once stood forgotten behind a tool shed. Its paint was chipped, hinges rusted, and would weary from years of rain and sun. But where others saw junk, a gardener saw potential. She painted the door a soft pastel blue, like morning skies after a cold night. Little by little, it transformed. Tiny metal buckets, once used for kitchen herbs, were fixed across its surface, now cradling vibrant chrysanthemums in gold, marigolds in orange fire, and asters in hues of lavender. The blossoms danced with every breeze, spilling over like laughter on a spring morning. Placed in a tiny front yard, against the old red brick wall, the door stood proudly, no longer an entrance, but a destination. It framed the garden like art in a gallery, drawing the eyes and the hearts of passers-by. Children stopped to point. Neighbors slowed down their walk. Birds perched atop it as if guarding the blooms. What once was trash, now whispered stories of rebirth. In a world chasing the new, this humble door reminded everyone that beauty often lives in what we leave behind. A vertical garden for small spaces, yes, but more than that, a daily reminder that with color, care, and imagination, even the most forgotten things can become someone's favorite corner. In the quietest part of the garden, beneath a weathered pergola entwined with vines, there lives a jug that whispers. Once forgotten in the corner of an old village kitchen, this clay candy had poured 1,000 cups of water into stories untold. Its surface bore the marks of hands long gone, scratches, fading patterns, the soft glow of years lived in silence. But today, it flows again, reborn as a gentle fountain under the wooden beams of a tiny backyard pergola. Tilted slightly on a handcrafted pedestal, the candy now sings in water. It spills softly into a stone basin below, not loud like a river, but calm like a memory. Around it, marigolds bloom like sparks of sun, and asters stretch toward the light. Birds come to drink. Bees pause to rest. The pergola above casts a soft dappled shade. Vines sway lazily in the breeze. Everything here feels timeless, as though nature agreed to slow down and listen. This jug, once deemed useless, now brings peace. Not just by its sound, but by what it symbolizes: transformation, tranquility, and the power of patience. It's no longer just an object, it's a ritual. A focal point. A daily invitation to pause. In a world where water often rushes, this fountain reminds us that sometimes beauty is found in the slowest streams. And so, beneath a rustic pergola, in the stillness of a backyard no larger than a breath, a jug whispers, and the garden listens. They were just rocks once, silent, heavy, unnoticed. Gathered from old riverbeds, flower pots, and the forgotten corners of garden sheds. But in the hands of someone who sees with color, even the dullest stone can sing. Each pebble was washed, dried, and then given a new life. One by one, they were painted under the golden afternoon light. Swirls of turquoise, dots of crimson, lines of lilac. Some bore delicate daisies. Others carried simple smiles. These weren't just stones anymore. They were invitations to smile, to slow down, to notice. Laid gently along a winding path in the tiny front garden, they bordered beds of blooming mums and trailing asters. Their colors danced beside the golden marigolds and whispered to the bees passing by. Neighbors paused to admire them. Children knelt to trace the painted petals. Dogs sniffed curiously at their cheerful glow. It was art, yes, but also something deeper. It was a reminder that gardens don't need to be grand to be great. That beauty blooms when we let it. That trash becomes treasure when touched with joy. The path didn't lead to a palace, just to a wooden bench beneath a tree. But in that place, wrapped in flowers, painted rocks, and quiet, the world slowed down just enough to breathe. Sometimes, it takes nothing more than a handful of colors and a basket of forgotten stones to turn a garden into a gallery. And every step on that painted rock path was a step through a story of creativity, of kindness, of color come to life. It cracked during a move, a clean split down its side, a handle broken loose. Once a beloved water jug passed down from a grandmother's home, it was nearly tossed away. Too broken to be used, too old to be mended. But one morning, as autumn leaves began to whisper, she saw it differently. She placed the jug gently in the soil, tilting it as if mid-pour. Into its hollow belly, she nestled the first string of sedum, then a trailing echeveria, then the velvety curls of donkey-tail succulents. With each planting, it looked less broken and more alive. The result was magic. It appeared as though the jug had poured out a waterfall of plants. A slow, green river curling across the garden bed, framed by asters and mums that nodded gently in the breeze. The sun caught the leaves just right, painting them with light. Bees paused at the blooms. Neighbors paused too. People often ask where she bought it. They never believe it came from a pile of almost trash. That its cracks were once seen as flaws, not features. That beauty here wasn't built from perfection, but from the courage to see again. In a tiny backyard, what was once broken now flows with life. The jug no longer holds water, but it overflows with story. It teaches that not all spills are accidents. Some are beginnings. And there, beside a humble pathway edged with stone, the jug spills on, its green cascade growing longer with each season, its roots deepening, its lesson lingering. There were once two doors, long forgotten, leaning against the back wall of a barn, weathered by rain and scorched by time. Their knobs were missing, their paint peeling. They had opened and closed many lives, then were left to rest. Until one day, they stood again, side by side, not as barriers, but as a gateway. In a small backyard, barely the size of a parking spot, those old doors were raised upright, joined by a simple beam. From that beam hung lanterns, some antique, others crafted from old mason jars and solar light caps. At night, they glowed like memories. During the day, they danced in the breeze like wind chimes of light. The arch stood at the edge of the garden path, where gravel gave way to a carpet of petals. Around it bloomed chrysanthemums in warm rust tones, soft purple asters, and marigolds like drops of sun. The doors, once plain, became part of the story, framed in vines, kissed by time, reborn by intention. It wasn't just a structure. It was a pause. A place to stop, breathe, and smile. A photo frame for nature's quiet moments. Couples walked through it hand in hand. Children ran beneath it like it led to secret worlds. In that tiny space, something shifted. A forgotten item wasn't just rescued, it was revered. Beauty was not bought, but built. And through those rustic doors, Anyone could step into a world stitched with intention and filled with soft light. Sometimes, it's not about opening a door. Sometimes, it's about becoming one. In a neighborhood where gardens were boxed in by sterile metal or soulless plastic, one fence whispered a different story. It wasn't tall. It didn't guard. It welcomed. This fence was born from doors, old, halved, and hinged no longer. Once they led to kitchens and parlors, to barns and cellars. Now, they stood proud, weathered and whimsical, in a zigzag along the edge of a small garden. Each panel wore a new coat, pastel blues, sage greens, soft creams, painted not to hide the past, but to celebrate it. On each door hung tiny gardens of their own. Clay pots and tin buckets, rust-kissed and soil-filled, cradled the scent of fresh herbs. Mint spilled over the rim. Basil reached up for sun. Rosemary stood strong, like a memory that never fades. The names were handwritten on wooden tags, tied with twine and care. Children brushed their fingers over the leaves, releasing bursts of fragrance. Guests reached out to pinch a sprig for their tea or their salad. Birds sometimes perched and peered, as bees busied themselves below among the marigolds. It was more than a fence. It was a story stitched from second chances. It defined the garden, yes, but more so, it defined the gardener. Someone who didn't see junk, but potential. Someone who knew that boundaries could also be bridges. In the evening, when the light softened and shadows grew long, the herbs swayed gently, singing their green lullaby. And the doors, silent no more, stood as proof that even when you no longer open, you can still invite life in. Long before it stood as a beacon for birds, these jugs held oil, water, and soup. Their lips had kissed countless kitchens, their bellies warmed by fire. But years passed. Cracks formed. Handles chipped. They were stacked in silence at the back of a shed, waiting to be forgotten. Until one quiet afternoon, someone saw not waste, but song. She dusted them off, rinsed them clean, and with gentle hands, turned them into a tower. One by one, she stacked them, carefully angling each, carving little openings, brushing new life with strokes of floral paint. Seeds replaced water. Perches replaced lids. the jugs were reborn. In the early morning, the garden now chirps. Sparrows, finches, and robins gather at the jug mouths. They dart and hover, feast and flutter. The tower sings, not with wind, but with wings. Around it, flowers bloom with pride, asters, marigolds, and mums swaying in rhythm to the bird ballet. The sun casts soft halos around the jug edges, turning clay into gold. It's a scene that draws the eye and soothes the soul. Neighbors pause at the fence, smiling. Children whisper as they count the birds. Even the cat, perched nearby, watches in quiet awe. This tower was never meant for grandeur. It was built for joy, for quiet moments, for beauty that emerges not from money, but from meaning. And in the smallest garden corner, on a simple pedestal of painted wood and memory, the old jugs sing once more, not with voices, but with life. In the corner of a tiny yard, where nothing seemed to fit, a spiral began to take shape. It started with a handful of stones, smooth and silent. Each was picked from forgotten garden beds, paths, and pots. Their colors were dull, their edges worn. But in the right hands, dull becomes canvas. One by one, they were painted, not with precision, but with joy. Soft pinks, dusky blues, lemon yellows. Some bore dots, others delicate petals, some just a swirl of gentle brush strokes. No two were the same, but together, they spoke in color. The gardener arranged them into a spiral, starting from a single bright center, then slowly outward, winding like a quiet thought. As the spiral grew, so did its rhythm. It breathed with the garden. Within its coils, tiny succulents and asters nestled, finding comfort among the colors. It wasn't just decoration, it was meditation. A centerpiece of calm in the chaos of the world. People came and stood before it, not speaking, just watching, tracing the path with their eyes, letting their minds soften. Butterflies landed gently on its edges. Bees dipped into nearby blooms. Even the wind slowed as it passed. The spiral didn't ask for attention, yet it became the garden's heart. A focal point. A place of wonder in a space once too small for anything important. But beauty, it turns out, does not require space. It requires intention, and color, and time. So there it lies, in a tiny yard, ringed by laughter, leaves, and blooms, a quiet spiral that reminds us that art doesn't always hang on walls. Sometimes, it blooms in the dirt. It used to stand tall, that door, guarding the entrance to a home now lost to time. It had heard laughter and rain, felt the wind and the knock of returning hands. Then one day, it was removed, set aside, no longer needed. But doors remember. They long to welcome again. And so it was reborn, not upright this time, but resting, as a bench in a sun-dappled garden. Its panels were sanded smooth, its frame repainted in a soft ivory. Then came the brush, marigolds in amber, asters in lilac, mums in golden yellow. Each flower painted by hand, as if blooming from memory. A quiet tribute to the garden it now belonged to. Set beneath a flowering tree, the bench became a place of pause. Children climbed it with muddy shoes. Neighbors sat with tea and shared stories. Butterflies stopped by, mistaking the painted blooms for real ones. The air smelled of herbs, and sometimes, of nostalgia. It didn't matter that the bench was once a door. What mattered was that it invited again, not into a house, but into a moment. Here, surrounded by flowers and sky, the bench whispered something old and kind. You don't have to go anywhere to arrive. Just sit. Just be. In a world rushing forward, it offered stillness. In a space once too small for comfort, it offered a welcome. And in the language of wood, color, and care, it reminded every passerby that things once discarded could carry new purpose. It was no longer just a bench. It was a story you could sit in. Every garden has a forgotten corner, shaded, overlooked, too tight for furniture, too odd for flowers. But she didn't see waste. She saw invitation. From a shelf of mismatched clay jugs, some chipped, some stained, she chose 3. Small, imperfect, but each with a charm. With steady hands, she painted them in soft jewel tones, sapphire, rose, and moss. Patterns bloomed across the surfaces, leaves, petals, and tiny bees. Then came the assembly, a single iron rod through their centers, anchored into a hidden base. The jugs were tilted, slightly off balance, like laughter caught mid-spin. Between them, she tucked little trails of sedum and strings of pearl succulents. She placed the totem in the quietest corner of her patio. That's when the space changed. Sunlight caught the colors each morning. Bees circled curiously. Visitors asked, "Where did you buy that?" And she smiled, because it wasn't bought. It was revived. This wasn't just sculpture. It was intention, playfulness, renewal. The jugs had once poured water. Now, they poured joy. Children reached up to touch the lowest jug. Birds occasionally perched atop. And she? She sipped her tea beside it, grateful that even the smallest, strangest spaces could become beautiful, if we only dared to look again. In that corner, Where weeds once crept and dust once settled, a totem now stood. Not tall, not grand, but alive. And as seasons changed, and flowers came and went, the totem remained, whispering softly. Even the smallest piece of trash can rise, when stacked with care and painted with love.